Welcome to the Etsy Conversations podcast, featuring inspiring interviews with Etsy shop owners, hosted by Ijama Elazu.
Hi, and welcome to the Etsy Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Ijama, and I thank you for joining me for another podcast episode. This week, my guest is Kwadwo, and he runs the Etsy shop Crafted Glory Design. He's been selling on Etsy since 2007. And Kwadwo, I just want to thank you for being my guest and welcome you to the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much, Ijoma. It's great to be on your podcast.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you. Before we start, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you make and sell on Etsy?
Sure. So I describe myself as a maker. I just love making things, and the medium that I choose can vary, but currently the medium is wood. And so I craft jewelry out of wood, particularly earrings. So I design a bunch of earring styles and make them out of wood. And I also make housewares such as cutting boards and wall art, just things that you would have around the house.
Yeah.
And then I also do furniture. So coffee tables is one of my favorite things to make, side tables. And I'm starting to venture into larger pieces such as dining room tables.
I want to talk about that because one of the things that I know a lot of sellers, or some sellers, are pensive about is shopping bigger items. And it sounds like you're working your way up to that. So we'll get to that. But before that, how did you learn how to craft with wood and make jewelry and household furniture?
Well, my story of how I got into working with wood is kind of roundabout. And so it all started with my getting my house here in Asheville, North Carolina.
Yeah.
So initially I wasn't thinking about owning a home, but my dad really encouraged me to do that. So we found a house that I loved, and excuse me, having recently graduated from college, I didn't have a lot of furniture. So I moved into this really empty house. It really echoed with every move. So I realized I needed to furnish it. And initially I was going around to thrift stores and trying to find inexpensive items to use, but I couldn't find anything that I really loved. So I decided I'd just try and make something. So I got some pieces of wood from Lowe's and some glue and a couple other things and slapped something together. And it didn't look that great, but the experience of making it with my own hands was so rewarding, and that just stuck with me. So after that, bit by bit, I acquired a few other tools and started to experiment more and more, and fell more and more in love with working with wood. So it's been an organic progression since then, which was around 2015.
Wow.
And so I've just been learning on my own, looking at videos, talking to other woodworkers.
Yeah.
So then fast forward to today, I make furniture, and then the jewelry came about from a conversation with my little sister. She was trying to come up with ideas for how to raise money for a trip she was going to take through her school to South Africa. And the idea of jewelry came up. So I thought, why don't I go into my shop and see if I can make something? And so I started experimenting and came up with some designs and progressed into making jewelry with wood. And it's something I really love doing. And people seem to like the designs as well.
Yeah. Now, Kwadwo, you know that's not normal for everyone, right? Most people don't get to a new house and decide they're going to make their own furniture, even without looking at YouTube videos or whatever. So I feel like, you probably had this gift already. And, to just be drawn to wood and to make your own furniture, sounds to me like something that just already comes from inside. Before you decided to look at YouTube and, hone your skill. So I think that's really impressive. And then that your first thought to help your sister was to make jewelry out of wood. That's really impressive and inspiring, and good to hear.
Ever since I was a child, I really enjoyed making things. And my mom was actually showing me a picture that she had of me holding up a Lego submarine that I'd made. And it reminded me of growing up. I would just spill all my Legos on my floor and spend the whole day building things.
Wow.
And if I couldn't get something to work, I would get so frustrated. It was just like I wanted it to work. And as I look back at that, I realized that that's still me. When I have an idea in my mind, I just want it to work. So I'll just do whatever it takes to try and make it work.
Yeah.
And sometimes that lends itself to frustration, which is a whole nother thing that I combat sometimes. But yeah, I've always enjoyed making things with my hands.
How's the furniture in the house? Have you finished making all the furniture, or are you still taking your time and adding pieces?
Well, I have several pieces throughout the house, but yes, I'm still making things. Right now I'm working on a dining room table made out of ambrosia maple, and it's kind of a Scandinavian inspired design.
Oh,
yes, that's going to be downstairs, and I'm really excited about that piece.
Nice. Now, when it comes to sourcing the woods that you work with, how do you decide what type of wood you want to work with? What type of wood would be best for a particular, piece of jewelry or furniture or like a wall hanging?
Yes, so I only work with native hardwoods, native to the U.S.
Okay.
I don't use exotic wood, and primarily I use maple, walnut, and cherry.
Okay.
Those are just three of my favorite wood types, and I'll combine them in various ways. And sustainability is a big consideration for me. So I have 3 different suppliers in the area that I source from, and primarily they get their wood locally, which is really important for me. And so yeah, that's where I get my wood.
Okay. Does buying your wood locally help with pricing your items, as in it helps you keep your prices within a certain range, or does it not make a difference were you to get wood from places that are not local to you?
Well, I haven't really looked into sourcing from far away, and thinking about it, it actually in some ways could be cheaper, because if I were to go with a big supplier, they do large scale lumber operations. Maybe I could get cheaper prices, but that's just not something I want to do. So going local is just a thing that I've determined that I want to do.
Yeah.
And the valuable thing about it is I can build relationships with the local people, and the wood is often sourced from someone's yard where a tree fell, and then they sold it to this person, and then they'll process it, and then I buy it from them. So that I just love that setup.
Yeah. And I do like the idea of making local connections. I think when we work online, like selling on Etsy, sometimes we forget that we can connect locally and sometimes make even better connections that way, just by staying within our working with businesses that are in close proximity to us physically.
Right.
Now, so 2015, you bought the house and you started building your own furniture. And then in October of 2017, you opened your Etsy shop. How did you discover Etsy and why did you decide that was where you wanted to sell?
Mm. Um, let's see. I've been trying to think back to exactly how I found out about Etsy, but I can't quite remember. I think it was either in a conversation or I just saw it somewhere online.
Yeah.
But when I first heard about it, I didn't really think that it was something that I could do. I just felt like it was something others were succeeding at, but it would just be too much to try and make it work.
Mm-hmm.
But finally, I broke down and decided that I would try it. So I did open my shop in October of 2017, and it was just silence once I opened it.
The
I
Etsy
looked at,
crickets, you heard them.
yeah, the Etsy crickets. I put a few items on there, and I just didn't hear anything for months, actually. And it wasn't till February that I got my first sale. And actually, the first few sales were from people I knew.
Oh,
So that it was nice, but it didn't really count for me as actually gaining traction.
yeah.
But the beautiful thing was that once traffic started building, then strangers started to purchase things. So the first purchase from someone who I did not know happened later in February
Okay.
of 2018.
Yeah. And that was the really exciting one, I'm sure.
That was very exciting.
Yes. I always like to think about that. Like, wow, somebody out there in the world that does not know me, does not care about me, does not love me, but wants this thing I have and I
Yeah.
make, that's mind blowing.
Yes, so mind blowing.
Okay, so so that was about 4 months, October, November, December, January, February. Yeah, that was about 4 months without any sales. And and I'm glad you said that because you went through the Christmas and holiday selling season and nothing.
Nothing.
So that's good to know, so that for anyone who's listening whose expectations might, or who might be feeling a bit discouraged because nothing is happening yet, sometimes that's just how it is. And so you've gone through one Christmas/holiday selling season, which was 2018. Was that any different than the holiday selling season of 2017?
Absolutely. It was a little crazy. I wasn't expecting it. I was actually in Europe over that time period. Well,
What?
leading up to it. Yeah, leading up to it. So I went to Dublin, Munich, and London over the Thanksgiving holiday. And that's really when the traffic picked up. So while I was there, my phone would keep buzzing, and I look and there's an order. And then a couple hours later, it would buzz and there's an order. And I was excited, but getting worried because I was asking myself, will I be able to fulfill these orders in time and not have them be late?
Yeah.
So that became quite a rush. Once I got back, I had to fulfill all those orders. But those were for the Christmas. Those were people ordering for Christmas gifts,
Okay.
and that was very exciting for sure.
So how did you handle that? Because on Etsy, when you create a listing, you have to put in what your handling time will be, like basically how much time you're going to need to make it before you ship it. And so you're all the way in Europe. I know I would be freaking out because I don't, well, I guess it also depends on how long you were gone for. So did you have enough time between when you got the orders and when it was time to ship out, or did you run late on those? And did that cause a problem with the customers?
Yeah, so I was in Europe for 9 days, and my lead time varies from 3 to 5 days to 5 to 7 days, depending on the item.
Okay.
So some of the orders came at a time where when I returned, I would have enough time to fulfill them, but some
Okay.
of them did not, and I didn't get to change the processing time before those orders came through. So, but fortunately, everybody was understanding. Those ones that I had to be a little late for,
Mm-hmm.
there was no one really commented about that at all.
Okay, good.
And there are a couple where I just let them know that I was traveling and I would get their order to them as soon as possible.
Okay.
And they were all very understanding and
Oh, good.
accommodating. Mhm.
Okay, good. Now, in retrospect, or I shouldn't say in retrospect, going forward, if you plan to take a vacation again, what do you think would work better for you, to put your shop on vacation or to leave it open and just change your processing times?
I would definitely just change the processing time
Okay.
because I don't want to lose the benefit of the activity in my shop that
Yeah.
the Etsy algorithm looks at.
Mm-hmm.
So if I put it, excuse me, if I put it on hold, then I lose that traction.
Yeah.
I believe that's how it works. So yeah, I'll just change my lead time.
Yeah, I agree. And that's what I've started to do, except for once when I was moving and I would not have access to anything. I actually did put my shop on vacation for a while till I got everything, till I was reunited with my stuff.
Okay.
But now what I do is like you, I change the processing time and then I put something in the announcement section, so that I don't actually have to put my shop on vacation. But I know that doesn't work for everyone, but it's a good alternative if it's something that works for your particular shop and the products you make and sell, etc. For anyone else who's wondering how to handle that.
hmm
So, outside of selling on Etsy, do you have another job?
Yes, I do. I work full time as a supervisor at a manufacturing plant, and I work second shift, which is from about 1:30 till 11 p.m. So I've been working at that company for 5 years.
Okay.
So it's quite a handful and juggling both.
So how do you handle that? How do you manage your time? Because that's a good chunk of your day.
hmm
And, either you have to be very productive in the morning before you go or be a night owl. So how does a typical day look for you?
Yes, so I've locked myself into a pretty tight schedule.
Mm.
I'm typically up by 7 a.m. at the latest. Sometimes I try to do earlier. And then I'm in my shop by 7:45 or 8, and I'll work till about 9:45. Then I'll go to the gym, exercise, and come back and work for another about an hour, hour and a half, and then grab lunch and then go to work. And then the cycle continues again the next day.
So when you come back from work, I assume you just go straight to sleep. There's no time for any well, not for making, I'm sure, but anything to do with Etsy.
Sometimes if there's an order that I really need to fulfill in the next day or two, I will use that time to maybe glue up some wood.
Mm.
Like if it's something that needs to be glued, I'll do that so it can cure overnight,
Oh,
and
okay.
then I can work with it the next day. But for the most part, when I come home from work, I'll just wind down briefly and then hit the bed.
Okay. Do the people you work with know that you make and sell on Etsy, that you have this side thing going on?
Some people know, but I don't think they know to what extent.
Yeah.
So yeah, some people do know that I'm a woodworker,
Uh-huh.
but I don't really talk much about it as a business.
Yeah. Not there anyway.
Yeah, not there.
What's your long-term goal? Do you want to become a full-time maker, or are you happy with the way things are? Having your creative outlet and being able to earn some income through it, and then also having the full-time job.
I think about it a lot
Uh-huh.
because running the schedule sometimes can be quite stressful. Um, I I think I would like to eventually just be a maker, but I feel like my hesitation is that it seems nice, but practically, how would I make it work? Because my day job is paying the bills for the most part.
Yeah.
But I've also heard a lot of people talk about how until you take the leap of faith, um, you don't really know how it's going to work out. And sometimes taking that leap of faith actually unlocks um, your real potential, and you're able to that making is able to flourish.
Yes.
So yeah, I think about it a lot, but I don't think I'm quite there yet.
Yeah, I hear you. And there definitely, yes, I feel like there are different camps. There is that camp of just do it, you'll figure it out.
Hmm.
But then there's the other camp of no, plan your exit,
Hmm.
make your plan your steps, or
Yes.
get everything in order, get everything in line, and different ones work for different people. um so it's good that you're thinking about it and you know what you want. And I know you didn't ask me for my opinion or advice. I would say do what works for you,
Okay.
because everybody's norm is different. So what
Hmm.
one person is comfortable living on might not work for somebody else, based on where
Hmm.
you live, where what stage in life you're at, what responsibilities you have or don't have, what your plans are for the future, etc. So, yeah, I guess that's
Well,
where I stand.
I appreciate that feedback.
Oh, you're welcome. But in addition to having a day job and selling on Etsy, you also run an Airbnb.
Yes, I do.
How does that work? And how did you get into Airbnb?
Yeah, so I think my family, I get this from my parents. We just like to have as many things going on at the same time as possible.
Yeah.
We just can't just do one thing.
Yeah, same
So
here. I know.
so I found out about Airbnb through actually one of my employees at work, um, who no longer works with me, but he and his wife were doing Airbnb, and he told me about it. And I was skeptical at first, but finally I looked into it, and I started that in 2015. So it was about 5 months after I got my house. I listed one of my spaces on Airbnb,
Hmm.
and since then I've just been hosting in um, 3 rooms in my home.
Mhm.
So throughout the week, I have strangers in my house all the time.
Does that ever freak you out?
No, I love it. I love having strangers in my house. It just feels like the way things should be, where you can trust somebody in
Yeah.
your space and they trust you.
Yeah.
And I get to meet people from all over the world. I've had people from Germany, France, Chile, uh, England, all
Wow.
over. And it's
Yeah.
so nice to meet all of these people.
Do you ever stay in touch with your guests?
Yes, I do. I do stay in touch with some of them,
Mm.
and some have become friends. One guest and her family who stayed with me when they were transitioning from Florida, actually is now a really good friend, and
Nice.
she bought one of my coffee tables,
Oh, nice.
and I'm making some other stuff for her.
Oh,
And
nice.
yeah, it's
Okay.
interesting how the two have Etsy and Airbnb have intertwined in my
Yeah.
life, because
Yeah.
some of my guests have actually helped my Etsy. I had one guest who sold me some of his tools for really cheap.
Oh, wow.
And then I've had some guests who have bought pieces, so it's been neat.
That's nice, actually.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's like I guess it just all flows together.
It does.
Yeah, I've thought about Airbnb before and I thought,
Hmm.
man, the idea seems nice, but then,
Hmm.
you watch an episode of Dateline NBC or something like that, and you're like, okay, no, no
Yeah.
strangers coming in here.
No
But then
strangers.
I hear stories like yours, and I know other people who do it, and I've heard nothing but positive, um, positive stories. And so, I mean, there might be negative ones out there, but personally,
Yeah.
for the people I've talked to, friends that I have, and then now you, it's
Hmm.
always just been a really positive experience. So, it's good.
Absolutely. I've had about 650 people stay in my home since since
What?
I started,
Oh,
and it's
wow.
for the most part been very positive.
Yeah.
Um, and my manager was joking with me one day, saying, "I'm doing everything I can to keep people out of my house, and you're just letting them in."
Different strokes for different folks.
Yes. And
And
another
uh-huh.
funny situation was one guest stayed in the room where I had some of my pieces in. I had
Hmm.
some side tables and some wall art. And he was messaging me from the other room. I was in my room,
Yeah.
and he was saying, "How much for this piece?" And I
Oh,
was sending through the Etsy app. And then he asked, "Well, okay, how much for this other piece?"
wait,
So
he went
he
to
was
your Etsy store and was messaging you through Etsy?
through Etsy.
Oh.
So then he purchased a few things while staying in my Airbnb.
So
So
did he just pick them up off the wall after he paid and then
yes, he just took what was on the walls and
that is funny. That's that's a funny story. Now, do most people come to Asheville? Because I know Asheville is kind of, it's very entrepreneurial, but also artsy. What brings most of the people who come and stay at your place to Asheville?
Mm. Yes, Asheville is a really neat place to visit. It's very artsy for sure. Um, we there is a lot of folk art around here
Mm-hmm.
and more contemporary art as well. The music scene is also interesting. People come for
Oh,
that. People come to visit the Biltmore House, um, which is located here, the Biltmore Estate,
okay.
and
Who's the
people come
Biltmore? I
from
know this sounds ignorant, but who are the Biltmores?
oh, so right around the time of Rockefeller,
Uh-huh.
the Biltmore um, was also just one of the very wealthy
Oh,
families.
okay.
Mhm, mhm.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. Well, congratulations on your success with Airbnb.
Oh, thank you.
Good for you. I'm so impressed with all what you're doing and all what you have going on. Truly entrepreneurial, but also, staying on track. So let's talk about promoting your Etsy shop. What do you do to drive traffic to your shop? Are you heavily into social media or do you rely on blogging? And I know you have a blog. And for anyone who wants to hop over and check out Kwadwo's blog while we're talking or after listening to this, it's at craftedforglory.com/blog, or you can just go to craftedforglory.com and then you'll see a link to uh, check out his blog. And again, it's the same name as his Etsy shop. Well, actually, no, not really. Your Etsy shop is Crafted Glory Design.
Hmm.
Okay, so the blog is craftedforglory.com. So, how do you drive traffic to your shop? Do you do anything intentionally, or you're just relying on SEO passively?
So I do some things intentionally. I post on Instagram and also on Facebook, but those have not really driven traffic to my Etsy that has turned over into sales.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it has in a small way, but I'm still working on that, trying to figure out how to do that very well. I also have done a little bit with Pinterest, but that's a bit of a learning curve for me.
Yeah.
So most of the sales really have been organic and from Etsy's algorithms.
Okay.
So I'm still working on that. I feel like there's a lot of potential there, but
Yeah.
I just have a bit to learn how to use that.
Do you with each listing go through the effort of optimizing the listings, like using the proper keywords in your tags and your descriptions and your titles, etc., or do you just go with what or do you not, I guess?
Yes, I do try and optimize my listings with the tags and the title and all of that. I feel like it's something that has to continually be nurtured because as I learn more and as I see what traffic looks like on other people's listings, I can modify mine. But yes, I do try and optimize my listings.
Okay. Now, what led you to start the blog?
Um, I really just had some things that I was thinking about, and I wanted to write them somewhere. So the blog made sense, and I also thought that would be a good way to drive traffic to my Etsy.
Yeah.
So that's how that came about. And my first post, I wrote about the difficulties of working through discouragement. That was something that was heavy on my mind. So I wrote about that. It hasn't initially my plan was to post every, I think, Tuesday and Thursday, but I have
Not
veered
so
far from
easy,
that.
huh?
Not easy at all.
Yes.
So now it's just sporadic.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that we underestimate when we take on something like blogging. You're right in thinking thinking that it would be a good way to drive traffic to your shop, because it can be, but it does take time and effort, and blogging is a skill. It's a skill that one has to learn, and there's a lot that goes into it. But I do like that you do have a blog, and it's a nice way for people to get to know a bit more about you. I think what you write is really inspiring, and I know people are engaging with you on there. Do you see traffic in your stats that show that the blog, even now, is sending you traffic to your Etsy shop?
I haven't looked very closely into that. I do look at my stats and I see some of the traffic comes from outside of Etsy and from Instagram, etc. But I haven't really correlated the blog directly with that.
Okay.
The blog is something I also need to nurture more, and there's a lot of potential there to use it and leverage it.
Yeah.
Actually, one of my plans was to do the blog and then leverage it through Pinterest, because I see that done a lot.
Yes.
And then use that to drive traffic to Etsy.
Yes. And it's funny you say that, because that's one of the things I'm trying to figure out is like, okay, let me really learn how to do this blogging thing well, and the Pinterest, like the convome.com site where I, that's all about the podcast. I honestly have not really tried to optimize for anything. It's just the home of the podcast where people can connect, with me, or, listen to episodes and what have you. And so I realized that, rethinking it, you have to come up with a plan, and it has to be strategic. I was just like all willy-nilly, like, okay, it's all here if you want it. But you're right. I think that it could be blogging, not just for what I'm doing, but as makers, can be a very powerful way to drive traffic to the shops, especially when combined with Pinterest. And so that's good, but it will take, you're right, there is a learning curve. I thought I could just jump on there and figure it out, but Pinterest it's its own beast.
It is.
And it's a good one too, I have
It
to say.
is.
It's a good
Yeah.
one, but you need to learn how to write it.
Yeah, it's a learning curve.
If you are thinking of getting into Pinterest, do you have any resources that you're using, or you haven't yet really started down that track?
Well, I received the emails from Pinterest where they give information and tips.
Okay.
So I've been using that, and I've looked at a couple videos,
Mm-hmm.
and that's about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like it's a little. I feel the tension of realizing that I could really grow this if I can leverage these tools well, but there's this gap where I don't quite know how to leverage them well.
Yes.
So
I'm right there in the gap with you. I know.
yeah.
I'm like, I see the potential,
Mm-hmm.
but how?
Yeah.
So, oh yes, I was going to ask, craftedforglory.com, what platform do you host that on, and how easy or difficult was it to learn that platform and learn to use it and get your site up and running?
Okay, I use Squarespace,
Okay.
and Squarespace is really great, really user friendly, and it's designed to be beautiful. I believe that's their phrase,
Oh, really?
something regarding making it beautiful. So yes, and that's so true, and I love using Squarespace. It's not too much of a learning curve.
Okay. Do you have to be technically savvy to run a site on Squarespace? Have you found?
Oh, no, you don't have to be, and that's a
Okay.
good thing.
Okay.
So it's a lot of drag and drop. But if you want to get more technical, you can also do that. So Squarespace is designed to be accessible for people of all skill levels.
Okay. Okay, good. So I will put a link to Squarespace for anyone who wants to check that out. If all this talk about blogging has got you thinking that maybe you should start one too. I have heard that Squarespace is pretty easy, and might be easier for non-technical people than, say, WordPress, self-hosted. Or I think Squarespace might be kind of like WordPress.com, where it's pretty much all done for you, but still with WordPress there is a learning curve. So if you don't have the time or the inclination to learn, to learn a platform for blogging, I'll link to Squarespace so you can check it out. Now, Kwadwo, do you have times where you just feel like you're in a creative rut? And if so, what do you do to get yourself out of it and get back to creating?
Good question, because I run into this a lot. And actually, I just got out of one recently where some days I'll just feel really discouraged, and all these questions will come to my mind, like, why am I doing this? Why am I using my time for this and putting money into this? And all of those discouraging questions come to mind, and I'll feel like just stopping. And one particularly low period, I was just like, okay, I don't think this is working. I'm going to sell my tools, get rid of this wood, and just simplify my life. Because things are just, it gets complicated sometimes, juggling different things. But I've learned that those are not the moments to make drastic decisions, because typically in those moments, you're not really thinking clearly. And whatever stress is causing those thoughts isn't really shouldn't be the determining factor. So what I found to help me in moments of discouragement, when either a piece isn't working out, a new design isn't working, I can't think of a new idea, or something's taking too long, or I made a mistake, I will just move on from what I'm doing and go do something else. Maybe I'll just end my work in the shop for that day and go on and do something else. And then the next day, I go back to the shop. So that's what I do, is I've determined to each day to get in the shop and work. And I found that that regular routine has helped me to push through those moments of discouragement. And typically what I'll find is that next day when I get in the shop and I'm refreshed, I slept the night before, and I look at what I'm doing and I'm like, wow, I enjoy what I'm doing. And that the discouragement that was there the day before is no longer there, or it's less pressing, and I can push through.
Yeah.
So what I do is just set it aside and come back to it the next day.
Yeah. I like that because I think we all at some point experience that, and I like that you said you just stop, because I know for me sometimes, especially when I get really frustrated, the last thing I want to do is stop. I want to figure it out. I want to fix it. I want it, but it's good to hear from someone else that no, sometimes just stopping and walking away is how you're going to get out of that spot that you're in.
Yeah, definitely. Yes, I've found that sometimes the discouragement comes, for me particularly, it's when a piece is not coming out the way that I want it, or maybe a decision I made ended up being an expensive one. Like, for example, I'm making some furniture for someone. Actually, this is a friend of the person who stayed in my Airbnb many months ago.
Wow.
So,
Kwadwo, sorry, before you go on, I just think Airbnb might be your best marketing tool ever right now.
Yeah. It is a great tool. Yes. So I'm working on some pieces for her, and I realized that I don't think I priced some things properly.
Yeah.
So as I'm working on the pieces, it's taking more wood than I thought and more effort than I thought. So that led to getting really discouraged about the whole project. And in the money piece, how much money I put into the raw materials, it was all just getting really discouraging.
Yeah.
So with that, I definitely had to step away and regroup. And as I stepped away, I got to think more about the individual pieces and a different way I could approach some things. So then when I came back to it, really a couple days later, I was refreshed and was able to approach it in a different way. And now it's coming together a lot better.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
Yeah, nice. Thank you for sharing that. And since you mentioned pricing and, making a mistake with the pricing, how do you come up with what to charge for the pieces that you make?
Yes, good question. Well, the pieces that I have listed on Etsy are a bit easier to price than the larger pieces that I make that I haven't listed on Etsy yet. So the jewelry, like the earrings, I just look at the amount of time that it takes and also feedback that I've gotten from past sales. So just getting a feel for what other people are selling their jewelry for, and I have access to a large market here in Asheville where I can see what people are selling similar items for.
Okay.
So I use all of that information to develop a price.
Okay. Do you ever do local shows like local vendor shows or farmers markets or craft fairs?
I have not yet, but I really want to. And Asheville has some really great markets and craft shows. And so I'm really hoping to. And this is the year that I purposed to do at least one.
Oh, cool. How are you going to go about selecting the one that you want to do? What criteria are you going to consider in your decision?
I want to do one that is not too expensive to get into. Some of them do cost money to be a part, and some of them don't. So definitely that's a consideration.
Yeah.
And then also the popularity of it. So there are a few here that are extremely popular and also very exclusive. So they're probably not as accessible, but there are also some that are get some good traffic, but also are more accessible.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it'd be nice to know how that goes for you and see if that's something you might want to make a regular part of your selling strategy.
Yes.
Now, having sold on Etsy now going on, you're into your second year. Are there any lessons, or is there one main lesson that you can share with someone out there that you've learned that might save them some headache?
Just one, or can it be a couple?
It can be more than one, yes.
Okay. One lesson I've learned is the importance of customer service. So I have to make sure that I am putting myself in the buyer's shoes, realizing that they don't know my work like I do, and their experience is that, or they don't know me as well, so that all they see is this item that they like, and they see my shop. So I need to, as I interact with them, I need to be very genuine and communicate well and be timely with my communication. So that's one thing. And then also the really investing time and effort into the optimizing the listings.
Oh, yeah.
Initially, I didn't think that it was such a big deal, but as I've seen the traffic that comes from places I wouldn't expect, I see it's very important to make sure that I'm putting good tags on my listings and good titles and good pictures as well. Good pictures, that is extremely important. And if you take some time and imagine that you are a shopper and you look at your own shop and see if the pictures are something that you would click on, that's a good indication of if someone else would click on it too.
Yeah.
And you can run it by friends and family to ask them. Yeah. But having a good picture makes a big difference.
It really does. And you have some really good ones. And I did want to ask, do you do your own product photography, or is this something that you outsource to a professional?
Yes, so I do some of my own photography, and I'm working on getting better at that.
Yeah.
But one of my good friends, Jennifer Henson, she's actually a photographer, Jennifer Henson Photography. She did the model pictures, the pictures of the models wearing the earrings, and some of the shop pictures in the about section about my shop.
Yes.
So she's actually been a really great collaborator.
Oh, great. Now you said it's Jennifer Hinson. Is that Hinson photography?
It's Henson.
Henson. Okay.
Jennifer Henson.
And if you don't know her website off the top of your head, I will look it up and put a link to it for anyone who wants to check out her work and maybe collaborate with her too.
Yeah, she's great.
Oh, good. Is she local to Asheville?
She's local,
Okay.
and but I suppose she may be willing to travel if needed.
Okay. Well, folks can ask her and see. Hopefully she will. Oh, what was I going to say? Oh, product photography was the last thing we talked about. Are there any tools or resources that you have found particularly helpful to your selling on Etsy and helping you grow your shop or learn about how to sell on Etsy better?
Oh, good question. I definitely make use of the emails I get from Etsy and the seller resources, the seller handbook, and the Etsy blog. That's really helpful for hearing other people's stories and how they're making things work.
Yeah.
That's probably where I get the most of my information. Occasionally, I'll also Google successful Etsy shops and then read about those shops as well,
Okay.
just
Cool.
to see how they were able to make it work.
Yeah. And I have to say, and I've always said this, Etsy puts out some really good educational information for sellers. I know people don't always agree with decisions they make, which is fine. Everybody can have their opinion. But as far as keeping sellers educated and informed about the platform, I think Etsy is really good about that. So it's always a good resource. The seller handbook, like you mentioned, the blog, and then they have a help section, which I don't know if people know about, but they have a help section and it's fully indexed and you can just search any topic and they have articles about how to do almost anything you want to do on Etsy.
Yes.
What's something you're doing now that you think is working really well for you?
Oh, what's something I'm doing now? Oh, definitely the schedule that I've developed for how I get things done. That is so crucial for me because I hear lots of stories about people saying, "Oh, I would love to do X, Y, or Z, but one day I'll do it," or "I wish I could do it, but I just can't." So as I hear those things, I'm thinking, "Wow, I'm very grateful that I've been able to lock myself into a discipline." And that's really important for getting work done, is to have your schedule and stick to it.
Yes.
So that is really working for me for generating content and pieces and designing things.
Oh, yes. I hear people talk about using certain methods to, help make sure they stay productive, like the Pomodoro technique and what have you. Do you use any of that, or you're just naturally focused? So when you say now is creating time, I'm going to spend X number of hours just making, I'm going to spend this much time doing this next task. Are you just naturally good about keeping yourself on task?
Well, actually, I am not very good about keeping myself on task. And that's why this is such a celebration, being able to lock myself into a schedule, because I'll get an inspiration and I'll just tangent over onto that inspiration. So so that is actually a plus and minus for me. When I'm inspired to do something, I'll just veer off and do it, but then something special will come out of that, and then eventually I come back to what I was working on. And I suppose that's just my style, but I feel like for me it's a balance of having that spontaneous inspirational moments and being able to play around with that, and also being disciplined about sticking to sticking to my schedule.
Yeah. Now, Kwadwo, before I let you go, what advice would you give to another seller who's kind of in a similar place where you are, still, within the first few years of selling on Etsy and trying to find some success on Etsy, but also has other things going on? What would you tell yourself if you were looking into the mirror, just to stay encouraged and to keep on the journey?
I would say just know your limitations, and don't be afraid to say no to some things to allow other things to flourish. That's also something I struggle with.
Yeah.
Is I will say yes to too much.
Yeah.
For example, there was a project that a local ad club asked me to do, to make some awards for their award ceremony.
Oh, nice.
And I said yes. And I didn't evaluate how much time and effort and money it would take to make the pieces. So although I did get a bit out of it, it wasn't nearly what it should have been for the effort it took.
Yeah.
So it's probably a project I could have said no to. At the same time, saying yes to it opened up some more ideas for additional things I could make. So yeah, it's just know when to say no, and just push through the discouragement, but also don't be afraid to take a break and allow yourself to get refreshed.
Yeah, I like that. Now, Kwadwo, what's the best way people can get in touch with you if they want to reach out and connect with you?
I'm on Instagram, and that's at Crafted Glory.
Okay.
And that's a good way. Email is also good, craftedforglory@gmail.com. Yeah, those are two great ways.
Okay.
Of
So,
course, I'm also on Etsy as well.
yes. Okay. So I will link to Kwadwo's Etsy shop, which is, again, Crafted Glory Design, and his blog, which is at craftedforglory.com/blog, or just go to craftedforglory.com and then click on the link for the blog, as well as on social media, your Instagram and your email. So if anyone wants to get in touch with you, they will be able to. And I am so grateful that we got to have this conversation finally, and I'm thankful that you came on to share your story. Thank you for being my guest.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's such an honor to be on this. I've been listening to your podcast for a while, and this is really special, being able to be on it.
Oh, thank you. I do appreciate that a lot. And for anyone else listening who wants to come on the podcast, we just talk craft and Etsy. So feel free to reach out to me, and I'd be glad to have you as my guest. Kwadwo, thanks again for taking the time out of your busy schedule. I now can really appreciate how busy you are. So it means even more. So thank you for that. And I thank you for listening to the podcast. I will be back next time.
Thank you for listening. You can subscribe to the podcast in iTunes, and while you're there, please leave a review too. Visit convome.com to leave a comment or feedback on this episode.